This is Have You Met? My guest today is a former United States Air Force officer, weapons controller, and missile propulsion engineer. In 1967, whilst commanding nuclear weapons at a launch facility, he was involved in a paradigm-shifting UFO incident. We talk about that UFO incident, organised UFO secrecy in governments, the risk of nuclear war, and the connection between UFOs and nukes, amongst much more. Have you met Robert Salas? So, Robert, tell me a bit about your military career and how you first became involved with nuclear weapons.
Well, let's see. I started my military career at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. I graduated from there in 1964 as a second lieutenant. Went to flight school and then went to work in what's called weapons controller, where I worked helping to train pilots fly intercept missions. And from there, I went on to the missile program as a launch officer in the Minuteman program. Was on that for about 3 years. And then I worked in the Titan III program as propulsion engineer for the program office. The Titan III was used to put up satellites, military satellites in orbit. And then I left the Air Force in 1971 and went to work first after I did my fill of skiing in Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
I went to work for Martin Marietta in Denver, and then Rockwell International in Los Angeles. And then I went to work for the Federal Aviation Administration as a structural engineer and aircraft certification of structures, aircraft structures. I did that for about 22 years. Then I decided to become a math teacher in high school. So I taught mathematics for about 17 years.
Wow.
Somewhere in between there, I wrote 2 books on the subject of my incident in Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967 when I was a missile launch officer. And later I wrote a book called Unidentified, the UFO Phenomenon, which covers more broadly the UFO subject.
Wow.
I've spoken in some 15 or 16 countries worldwide, all over the United States, given presentations at the National Press Club 3 times. 3 times at least. One in 2001, one in 2010, where we, some of us ex-military, talked about incidents at nuclear weapons bases. And then in 2013, also at a larger conference called the Citizens Hearing on Disclosure. It was an attempt to show what a congressional hearing would look like on this subject, which I'm hopeful for now that it can become a reality. And then in 2021, in October of this last year, so that's 4 times, isn't it? I gave a press conference along with 3 other witnesses, again, on the subject of UFOs at nuclear weapons bases. And that's kind of been my life.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. What was your kind of favorite period of that, would you say? Like, was it being a maths teacher? Was it that change of pace? Or was it, working with the airplanes?
Oh, it was all interesting. It was all good. I don't know if I've got a favorite. I really enjoyed teaching high school math. It's very satisfying to deal with young people and stimulate their interest in a subject that I love. And so I guess you could think of that as my favorite.
Nice, nice. Well, I'm sure the kids will be happy. Tell me about the job that you said you did for I think 22 years, like something to do with aviation and the structure of aircraft. What was that?
As you may know, all aircraft that fly passengers or, well, even, all aircraft have to be certified to Air Force regulations. Not Air Force, I'm sorry. FAA regulations, Federal Aviation Regulations in the United States. You probably have an equivalent in the UK. And so my area of expertise was the structural integrity of the aircraft. So we would make sure that, for example, they would do testing on the structures. The wing, for example, was a very severe test. Tested for the loads that it would experience in flight and that sort of thing. So, and then there would be modifications from time to time to passenger aircraft. I worked on those where the manufacturer, like Boeing, for example, would come in and want to add some piece of structure or remove some piece of structure on an aircraft that's already been flying, and we'd have to evaluate that. So that kind of thing.
Wow. Yeah. I don't want to jump far ahead here because I do want to come back and talk a little bit more about your military time, but that job sounds like it puts you in a great position to talk about like the kind of the more modern UAP sightings, like the Nimitz and things like that, with these extraordinary capabilities that are being witnessed, you know, like these acceleration, the speeds, the maneuvers. Do you have any like kind of thoughts on, would it be possible for us on Earth, on our planet, with our materials that we know of, to build something that can withstand things like that, the kind of speeds and G forces?
Yeah, we're talking about G forces in the neighborhood of 500 Gs. You know, a fighter aircraft may experience something like, 4, 5, 6 Gs. But 500 is out of the realm of understanding how, if there are occupants to those craft, how can they withstand those kind of forces? How can the structure of the craft withstand those kind of forces? So all this is phenomenal. And then going at high speeds, stopping in midair, reversing course at very high speeds. By high speeds, we're talking, thousands of miles per hour. Like I said, I worked in radar controlling jet aircraft, high-speed jet aircraft for a while. And at one point, we did have what was called a fast walker, or a blip that was moving extraordinarily fast across the screen. And we had no aircraft that could do that because I was controlling the fastest jets we had. Of course, it could have been an experimental aircraft, but in 1965, when we saw this, it was something we had no idea how that could appear and do those things. And the same thing in 1967 when I got a report from my security guards upstairs about what I just described to you. Lights moving at very high speed, stopping in midair, reversing course, making 90-degree turns.
This is your incident. This is the
this is my incident. This is what was reported to me.
Is it Echo Flight, the incident?
No, mine was Oscar Flight.
Right. Okay.
Oscar Flight. So we can go over my incident if you want.
I mean, I'd love to hear that one as well. Before we talk about yours, though, I'd like to kind of just do like a few minutes more background about where you were at that point and like your situation at that point and the build up to it. But if this is one that's not directly related, do you want to do this one first?
Well, I was just trying to explain to you why these objects could not have been produced on Earth.
Yeah.
Like you say, I've got a background in aircraft structures, right, and flight.
Mm.
And I've got a advanced degree in aeronautical engineering. I've got a master's degree in aero engineering. So I can explain to you that by we, I mean the United States, and obviously we had the more advanced technology of most anyone in the world on aircraft design and structure, et cetera, did not have any kind of equipment that could do what those objects did and what has been reported. And I was trying to explain why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I still want to hear that one though, so we'll come back to that in a minute. That Echo flight that you're going to tell me about, 1967. But I guess just to set the scene a little bit more, rewinding to your military time. So you said you first got involved with nuclear weapons how many years after joining the military?
Well, let's see. I graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1964. I started my missile career at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1966.
Okay, and that you were part of the Air Force at that point, the U.S. Air Force based in Malmstrom. Right. Okay, and so about 2 years later. So did you get any say in that, or was it just like a case of, Robert, you're going out to Malmstrom?
Well, the Vietnam War was ongoing at the time. It really was the early stages of Vietnam. I volunteered to go to Vietnam in 1965, but they didn't have a position for me at that time when I volunteered. And in the meantime, they advised me of this other program where I could get my master's degree if I would become a missile launch officer. So I went through that program. I accepted that. Mm-hmm. That's how I got started.
Okay.
You don't have much of a choice, but in that particular instance, they gave me that option. Yeah. Because they didn't have a position for me yet in Vietnam. So I never got back to Vietnam. But anyway,
probably a good thing. But yeah, so when you ended up getting this position, what were your feelings about it? What were your thoughts towards it? Did you kind of ever step back and think about the gravity of it, like what these weapons can do and all that kind of stuff?
Well, at that time, we were in a Cold War, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a military man. I'm there to defend my country militarily. And part of that was to man the intercontinental ballistic missiles that were part of our strategic defense. I had no feeling about that one way or the other. Of course, I knew nuclear war would be horrendous. Mm. So in 1967, the U.S. and the USSR had accumulated, I'll just stick with the U.S. The U.S. had about 35,000 nuclear devices, bombs. That was the highest ever.
Yeah.
And the Russians, or the Soviet Union at that time, had about the same. So between the two of us, we had over 70,000 nuclear bombs. It was a pretty dangerous situation, even more than it is now. Now, on the Minuteman I missile at that time, and this is open source information, so I'm not telling any secrets. The bomb itself had the capability of 800 kilotons of yield, kilotons of TNT yield. The bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki had about 20 kilotons yield, and they killed over 100,000 people in each city.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how serious the situation could have been if we had gone to war with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's a scary concept, isn't it, really? Like, you have to wonder which person out there would ever think it's in their interest to start a nuclear war? But I suppose it's not always how it works, is it? People don't always think rationally and have rational goals.
Exactly. Exactly.
But it is a terrifying concept.
Yeah. If you look back in history, a lot of the wars are started almost accidentally. I mean, not accidentally, but not all of them, but some.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same thing could happen with the use of nuclear weapons. And right now we have over 9 nuclear nations. I think we have 10 now. And other countries now want nuclear weapons, such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, North Korea's definitely got them, and they're improving their stockpile. And then we've got 2 countries, Pakistan and India, that are at war with each other. They are both nuclear powers. They have nuclear weapons. We don't know whether by accident or by intention they would try to use them, or any other nation. Also, the more countries that have them, the more risk we have that some of them will accidentally detonate or accidentally get lost or taken, let's say, by a terrorist group.
Yeah.
So we still have a very a risky situation with regard to nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a scary thought. I hadn't thought about that. It's slipping into the wrong hands, and yeah, the more there are, the more chance of that there is.
Right.
How real and imminent do you think the risk of nuclear war is now? What do you make of the current situation?
Well, currently, of course, we have this standoff with Russia and Ukraine. Russia's a nuclear power, and of course, the West we have nuclear weapons. We have what's called tactical nuclear weapons in Europe right now. By tactical, we're talking about, smaller nuclear weapons that can be carried on fighter aircraft. So that's kind of hanging over our heads, isn't it? Nobody said they'll ever use nuclear weapons, but in fact, they are available for use. So, again, it's a very risky situation. I'm not saying we could have a nuclear war. It's irrational, of course, to have a nuclear war. But what I am saying is that we have the weapons. Both the U.S. and Russia have already stated that they're going to be miniaturizing nukes for possible tactical use in war. We are supposed to limit our stockpile, but right now, with this situation we have with Russia, who knows whether those agreements will be adhered to as far as limits of stockpile. We need to seriously, as a civilization, we need to seriously work on this aspect of abolishing nuclear weapons completely. Of course, we'd all have to do it together. We can't have one country abolish them, and it just won't work that way. So somehow we've got to make a concerted effort. Otherwise, we're going to one day reach a situation where those weapons will in fact be used, and all bets are off after that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I just hope that somehow we can come to that, get to that point eventually where we're able to kind of cooperate as a civilization, as humanity, as planet Earth, and agree to do that. And nobody's gonna, it would end up being all of the superpowers would just have their fingers crossed behind their back and have a secret stash. The cynic in me says that, well, but it's scary times. But let's go on to your UFO incident, your UAP incident at Malmstrom, or the other one that you were going to say about, that you were going to mention a little bit earlier, whichever you want to kind of bring up first in chronological, or however you want to do it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about my incident real quick. but it in 19 uh, in March of 1967, my incident occurred March 24th, 1967.
So I'm just going to interrupt you as soon as you've begun, which is just great interviewing here, isn't it? But so you'd been there 3 years at that point, working with these missiles, or like kind of the man.
No, I got there in 66, so this happened in
A year.
67.
Sorry, a year.
So
Okay.
even less than a year. I think I got to Malmstrom in August of 1966.
Okay.
This occurred in March of 67. So.
And did anything out of the ordinary happen between you arriving there and this incident? Did anything like bizarre?
Well, we had reports in the local newspaper, people seeing lights in the sky. People did report that. I remember seeing little articles about that, but didn't think much of them.
Yeah. Okay.
I was not interested in UFOs at that time. It was not a major concern or interest before my incident.
Okay, so back to March 1967, and apologies.
March 1967, March 24th. We were on duty at Oscar Flight, which is near Lewistown, Montana, about the center of Montana. It's about 100 miles from Great Falls, 100 miles to the east. My commander was taking a rest break. We had a little, because one of us had to be awake, for the 24-hour period we were down there. So I was in command of the facility. First, I get a call from one of my guards saying they've seen strange lights in the sky, like I just described, flying over the facility. But they were just lights to him. And they flew very fast, stopped in midair, reverse course, making 90-degree turns, maneuvers he had never seen an aircraft make. He said, "They're not aircraft, sir." I even said, "You mean like UFOs?" Kind of jokingly. And he said, "Well, they're not aircraft." And it was a serious report. I said, "Okay, well, thanks for the report. Let me know if anything more interesting happens." And I hung up on him. About 5 minutes later, he calls back. This time he's screaming into the phone. He's very upset, very frightened. You could hear the fear in his voice. And this time he was babbling, shouting into the phone, not at all, a normal tone of voice. And he finally calmed him down. He said that there is a glowing red-orange object hovering above the front gate. I tried to get him to describe it. He said it was generally oval shaped, but I couldn't see very well because it had kind of a gaseous substance surrounding it. It was hard to see, and the light was very bright, red-orange, pulsating. Wanted me to tell him what to do, and I told him to make sure everything was secure and nothing got inside the secure area, the fenced area. And he said he had the guards out there, and he said then at one point he said one of the guards got injured. He had to hang up, so he hung up. And then first thing I did actually was look over at my console that showed the status of my missiles. And then I went over to wake up my commander, who was taking a rest break, started to tell him about the phone calls. All of a sudden, we get bells and whistles, klaxons really going off in the capsule, indicating there was a problem. We looked over at the status board, or status display, and the missiles were going from green, which meant they were ready to go, to red. Boom, boom, boom. They all went offline while this object was up there. Of course, we went through our procedures. Well, we had two of the launch facilities where the missiles are actually located, about a mile away, had security lights indicating that it was an incursion into the area where the missiles are located. So I had to call back up first thing I asked, is that orange red light still there? And he said, no, it just flew off. And then I sent teams out to 2 of those launch facilities to check out the security. They called back and said they were seeing UFOs again, or lights hovering above those facilities, and didn't want to go any closer. We brought them back. But at this time, of course, all our missiles were disabled. They were all no-go. In the meantime, my commander called the command post at Great Falls, Montana, at the base. And after that call, he turned to me and said, the same thing happened at another flight. A flight of missiles is 10 missiles. So we had various flights throughout the state of Montana.
Okay.
We had 15 other facilities like ours, each controlling 10 missiles. So a total of 150 missiles at that time. He said the same thing happened. And I thought he meant that evening. It wasn't until later that I realized it happened about 8 days earlier. Mm. And that was the Echo flight incident. I was at Oscar flight. Echo flight is another flight of 10 missiles. And they had a very similar incident to mine 8 days earlier. So in the span of 8 days, UFOs shut down 20 nuclear missiles in Montana. And that's the story that, and by the way, the other officers confirmed that shutdown, the Echo flight shutdown.
Yeah.
And the other officer who was in command is still alive and has got his testimony on audio tape. Also, my commander confirmed our incident on audio tape. So I've got that. And I've got documents now after filing under the Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah. And quite a lot of that you've put onto your YouTube, right? In some of the videos on there.
Yes. On my YouTube channel, Bob Salas.
I'll link to it in the description as well.
You can link to it. And I actually at first made 7 separate little videos, but I combined those into about a 39-minute video where I tell the entire sequence of events.
Yeah. So the 10 missiles, they are not connected to each other, are they?
The 10 missiles are independent. They are not connected in the sense that if one missile goes down, the others would also go down. So they're not connected. No.
Not like a set of Christmas lights where if one fuses, they all go. Okay. Exactly, So I'm assuming you spoke to people that had been working in these places for a lot longer than you, because at that point you'd been there for like we say, less than a year. So I'm assuming you spoke to people and said, like, has this ever happened? Like, have we ever had this kind of problem before? Like maybe without the UFO, or does it ever happen where 3 missiles, 4 missiles go off? Are there glitches? Are there errors? You know what I'm trying to get at? Like what are the chances of?
No, I'm afraid, Ben, I was unable to speak to anybody about this immediately after the event.
So you were told immediately you had to keep quiet?
And not only told, I was basically ordered to sign a non-disclosure statement. That same morning that we got relieved by another crew, we were ordered to go to our squadron commander's office and sign this document. From that point on, I spoke to nobody about this incident until 1994.
Wow.
So a span of 27 years.
Yeah, that must have been hard to hold all that in. Before they made you sign the NDA, the disclosure agreement, did they take your statement and things like that, like your witness account of what happened, or did they just not want to hear
it? Funny, when we walked into our commander's office, I wanted to know if he knew anything about what the hell was going on, and he said no. He was white as a sheet. He couldn't explain any of it, and the first thing, the other man that was in the office was a member of Air Force Office of Special Investigations, essentially the secret arm of the Air Force, um, security arm. Just shoved that piece of paper at us and said, sign here. They didn't even want to know our description of the events because, for two reasons. One is they had already experienced the Echo flight incident 8 days prior. They knew what was going on, and the fact that these objects were able to disable our missiles. And I'd like to go into that a little bit as how they might be able to do that. And the other reason was there was an ongoing investigation called the Condon investigation. This was set up by the Air Force. They gave a contract to the University of Colorado to do a so-called scientific investigation, which has turned out to be a whitewash.
Yeah.
The Air Force just wanted to get out of the business of reporting to the public on UFOs. But at any rate, for those reasons, they didn't need to hear our report.
Yeah. That's wild, isn't it? It's wild to think about, but yeah. If we took our technology that we have now in 2022, obviously we don't know, I don't know, you probably don't know about the cutting edge, secret technology, classified technology. But if we take our non-classified technology and the stuff really at the cutting edge of that and our brightest minds, is there any way, like, would we be able to shut down those 1967 missiles now?
I don't believe so. Let me just explain. And I get this from some reports we've seen that were sent to us under the Freedom of Information Act, because the Air Force itself said that they didn't understand how they could do this. Well, they didn't say UFOs, but they didn't understand how these missiles could have failed because there was no damage to any of the equipment. And the failure mode was the same in each of those 20 shutdowns. This object would have had to send some sort of signal through 60 feet of earth and concrete. We were down 60 feet. We had buried sensitive cabling system, which was triply shielded from electromagnetic interference. Triply shielded. So this signal would have had to penetrate that, go to each cable system separately for each missile, and go to a piece of particular hardware on the guidance system called the logic coupler. We had an inertial guidance system. We didn't have GPS at the time. So when the missile was launched, it would have to, by knowing its speed, direction, altitude, various other factors, it would have to calculate where it was above what surface of the earth. And so we had a computer on board. But what was needed was a stable platform, which had gyroscopes. So if you can imagine a set of gyros for each of the three dimensions, right? In space, 3 dimensions. And those gyros had to have a stable platform. In other words, we had to know this platform had to be level. It was a very advanced system, but at any rate, all this object did was to upset that stable platform where the gyros were, gyroscopes, and that was enough to disable the missile, because if it upset that stable platform, the logic coupler or the computer system could not calculate where the missile was after launch. So that's all it did. It did not damage any equipment.
Wow.
So, okay. So you're asking the question, could that happen today? I certainly don't think it could have happened in 1967, because if let's say the Russians had the ability to do that,
Yeah.
they would have been proud of that, wouldn't they? I mean,
It wouldn't have
they
been
would
only
have
20.
told the world that, yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead, have your missiles, but we can shut them down anytime.
Yeah.
No, that hasn't happened. I don't think we have the technology to be able to do that today either.
So what was the aftermath of this incident that you had, like that you experienced? So like you said you got transferred somewhere, you and the guys got moved to somewhere else?
They did that to the airmen quite a bit. This is a technique that the Air Force and the military have used for incidents such as UFO incidents, where they don't want the witnesses congregating and talking, spreading the word,
Yeah.
even though they're ordered not to. So they dispersed them, right? They dispersed them. I know a lot of them went to Vietnam. They were weapons qualified, so they were sent. A lot of them were sent to Vietnam. Um, I myself was on missile duty for another 2 years, and then I was sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to complete my degree, even though I could have completed it right there. Uh, but I was definitely deliberately sent to Wright-Patterson, the home of Blue Book, and that was 1969, just after Blue Book shut down, after this Condon investigation that I mentioned. The Air Force shut down Blue Book, which was the UFO study, Air Force UFO study, because they claimed that the subject had no real interest for them. It was not an issue of national security. Of course, they didn't mention or investigate. I mean, not the Condon investigation did not address the incidents that I just described.
Yeah.
So they didn't even consider them.
I read somewhere that the Project Blue Book basically had any cases that were deemed of interest to national security were basically siphoned away and never got to Blue Book. I think it might have been in Ross Coulthard's book that I read that, but
yeah, that's true. What we found out was that, in fact, Blue Book was supposed to be also for public information. It was not just for Air Force, but we found out that Blue Book did in fact have secret files, classified files of incidents they did not want the public to know about. And so in my research, I discovered that.
Yeah.
And absolutely.
So how were you feeling, again, to go back to that day, I think March 24th it was, how did you process that? You know, so this whole thing played out and then your shift finished and like your head must have been all over the place.
I was looking for answers. I'll tell you that. I went upstairs. We had a little elevator go upstairs, and first thing I did was talk to that guard that I had spoken to on the phone. First, he wouldn't speak with me. He didn't want to talk to me because he had been told by then that not to speak even to us about what had happened. But I finally got him to go over his description again. He was very, very cautious about what he said. I was very upset because I wanted answers. And then they sent out a helicopter for us, told us to get on board and get back to the base right away. And right after we landed, we went to the squadron commander's office. And at that point, no more talking to anybody. The next morning, actually, I got a call from these guards, one or two of the guards, and they begged me to come out and talk to them. they wanted me to discuss the whole thing with them, and I told them I couldn't. I was obligated that I could not do that, and that was a motivation later on for me to continue doing what I'm doing, and that is disclosing this to the world.
Yeah.
I think I owed it to them.
I mean, yeah, what an experience. It must have changed your whole life, I guess, at that point.
It did.
Changed the whole direction. So how deep does it go, like UFOs and nuclear weapons? How deep does the whole thing go? Because you've spent all this time since then, I suppose, seeking out and being sought out by people that have had similar experiences.
Yeah, in my book, my latest book, Unidentified, I list at least 12 or 13 other incidents similar to my own. This other witness that spoke in Washington, D.C. recently, this last year, had a very similar incident at Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota. He relieved the crew where 10 missiles were shut down by a UFO. And this happened in September of 1966. But there have been many other instances where UFOs have come over nuclear weapons bases, shown a beam of light. One in the UK you probably know of is the Rendlesham case. And again, the UFO shined a beam on the weapons storage area. That's been confirmed, where nuclear weapons were being held, probably illegally, from what I understand at that time. The UK was not supposed to have any nuclear weapons on their soil, but that's been confirmed. And there have been many others where, again, a UFO came over, shown a beam of light. And you're probably familiar with the case near where I live at Vandenberg Air Force Base, where a missile was launched, a test missile. This was an Atlas missile.
Oh, I was going to ask you to talk about this. This is Robert Jacobs,
1964.
Yeah? Mansman.
Yes.
Is that the one? Yeah.
Mansman and Jacobs, yes. Bob Jacobs was a lieutenant, had a very advanced video camera system that was able to track a launch of an Atlas missile and its warhead, and it was able to film a UFO flying circles, literally circles around the warhead, and shining beams of light, or sending beams of light to deflect the trajectory of this warhead. Pretty amazing. But it's a true story. It was confirmed by his commander, Mansman, in letters and in statements made by him and his wife. So yeah, there are many cases that have been validated. Another important case was the one with Major Bradford Runyon. He was flying a B-52 landing. Again, this is at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. Was told to go around, not land, to go around to over this facility and take a look. And there he saw this object had landed on the ground. He described it, drew a picture of it. When he landed, he was told by the commanding general that not only had a UFO interfered with the security of one of the sites, but had removed the cover from the launch silo. There was a cover that covered the missile, right? About 20 tons worth of cover. It had been lifted off and set aside by this object. 20 tons.
Yeah.
And the fencing had been crushed. Another important story. But like I said, I got about 12 or 13 others that I list in my book.
Yeah, and those are all ones that you like have spoken to people
And
personally and
those are the
things like
ones I
that.
know about. And there are
Yeah,
probably many that I don't know about
yeah,
because they're highly classified. Witnesses have been intimidated.
yeah. Another one I heard about, I can't remember enough to really give you much information right now, unfortunately, but I think it was a submarine. And I think a weapon got sucked out of this submarine basically by some kind of US, an underwater object, a submersible object that nobody really could identify. They
Uh,
saw in the depths, and this missile got sucked. But I'll have to try and remember the name, and I'll send it to you or link it in the description.
you know, I hadn't
Um,
heard.
it may be again in Ross's book, In Plain Sight. It's a treasure trove of multiple different instances. That's also where I first heard about Jacobs and Mansman's incident. Um,
Mhm.
okay, but yeah. So, what do you think about the face of UFOs, the like UFO stories, Roswell? What are your thoughts on Roswell? Because again, that was a nuclear base, right?
Yes, it was the only base in the United States, or probably the world, that was operational with nuclear bombs, because the outfit that was stationed there was the one that bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Uh, yes, that is a very well researched, let's say, well supported case. Roswell, 1947. There were actually two crashes, one about 30 miles from Roswell, and the other more like 100 miles from Roswell. And they happened probably one right after the other. And there were bodies recovered from both. Um, there have been over 300 witnesses that have come forward in at least, and some of these are written up. These testimonies have been validated through, for example, affidavits. The the man that wrote the first press release stating that the Air Force had recovered saucers. He's written an affidavit. He's now deceased, of course. But of course, you've heard of um, uh, Jesse
Yeah,
Marcel,
Jesse. Yeah,
who was the security officer, and his son. Uh, and there are, like I said, about 300 witnesses that have come forward and told their stories, validating that Roswell did really happen.
yeah.
So, and it's just a matter of getting the Air Force to admit to it, which they haven't at this point.
Do you think so you're convinced that there's a cover up? Do you think that this is where the cover up began? Basically, do you think this was day one of the cover up, or do you think they already knew stuff before then, and there had been?
Actually, I think the cover up probably began in 1942, uh, when we had an incident called the Battle of LA. I
Oh
don't know
yeah,
if you're familiar with that. This was in February, I think, March of 1942, just after the start of our U.S. involvement in World War II. Uh, there was a blimp-like object that flew over Los Angeles, was over parts of LA and Southern California for about 30 minutes at least, or maybe it was more like an hour. But pursuit aircraft were sent after it, tried to shoot it down. Uh, there were artillery shells, some 10,000, as I understand it, fired at it. Of course, again, we were at war with Japan at the time. We thought this could be a Japanese attack. And so we actually had military firepower fire at this thing with no effect.
mm.
And then it flew off over the Pacific Ocean and disappeared. This happened in 1942. So I can imagine that this so-called cover-up, or the Air Force, at least the military, knew there was something strange out there they couldn't explain, and they kept that from the public. But yes, essentially Uh, the major cover-up started at Roswell, after Roswell, during the Roswell incident.
Because I guess if they didn't have anything we don't know about, I guess that's where a lot of the questions started to, or some of the questions started to get answered and more questions started to be raised, I suppose. But so do you believe that this cover-up is largely the US Air Force, or do you think it's kind of much wider spread? Do you think it's all the departments of military? Because I know it's very compartmentalized and that kind of thing. And there's an article written by Christopher Mellon recently, which I'll talk about in a minute, which relates to this. But it does seem like, looking at things more recently, like that. Well, I'll just briefly mention his article now. He wrote an article on the Debrief a few days ago. It's in February 2022 on I think it was the US Air Force AWOL on UAPs, and he outlined the extensive radar capabilities that they have, and just obviously the non-classified radar capabilities that they have, and then basically just kind of pointed to the fact that we've had all these cases from the Navy, like 144 since 2004 to now, that they've opened up to, and yet I think it's pretty much none or near none from the Air Force, when they have radars in the same kind of areas and all that kind of thing. So just wondering if you had any thoughts on that. Again, I'm sure that it's probably not specifically just the Air Force that are trying to conceal this, but are they kind of like maybe the leading the charge?
Right. No question. Even the Army had UFO reports of UFO incidents in Vietnam, for example. But yeah, this information, this secret information, is held. Well, the Air Force really started the first organized investigation, you might say, with Project Sign, and then Project Grudge, and then Project Blue Book. So yeah, the Air Force has been involved from the beginning. Actually, in my book, I talk about, or at least in my last presentation, I talk about incidents over Hanford nuclear facility in 1944 and 45, and they had a Navy facility nearby, a Navy aviation facility, where they intercepted UFOs over the Hanford facility, which was producing plutonium for the first nuclear bombs. So the Navy has been involved from the beginning. So has the Air Force, and so has every other intel agency you can think of. What I think is going on is that there is a coherent group, a highly selective, highly secretive group, which I'll call the UFO cabal, that has been collecting this information in high secrecy from the beginning and to the present day. And it's an international group. I'm convinced it's international because these incidents have happened all over the world. The earliest in Europe, I think, was around 1933 in Italy, where a UFO crashed in Italy. So I think it's international. I think it's well organized, well funded, even though they're probably using dark funds or black projects, however you want to refer to them. But yeah, I think it's endemic, and it's been going on for a long time. Our governments know a lot about this subject that they have not released to the public, and that's what my main effort has been all along, is to try to get our governments to reveal what they know. Yeah. And I'll keep pushing that.
And no matter who you are and what you think, I think it's pretty much beyond debate that the governments know more than they've told us about these issues, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's just that, like, no matter how ardent the skeptic and everything, I mean, that's just, they've admitted that they've admitted that there's classified pages of this, the latest report that was shown to people that was not so there's just a fact that there's information that we're not told everything. So I guess the big question is, why do you think they are covering, they again, because we don't really know who the they is, so why do you think they, or whoever is they, is covering this up? Again, I can think of some reasons, right? There's the obvious reason, it could be for monetary purposes, profit, the same reason most things in this world happen, right? So they've recovered technology, they realize the possibilities with it, and they want to keep it quiet and for themselves to work on it and then put it out when they're comfortably advanced with it. But then there's lots of other things it could be. You hear things from, I think Tom DeLonge has been one of the people kind of pushing the idea that actually they're doing us a favor maybe by keeping the information from us, because the reality is so scary and it's going to mess us up so much. And obviously there could be elements of different things, but is it as simple as money, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think there could be, like you say, ancillary reasons, such as they're afraid how it might affect religious beliefs around the world, for example. But I think you hit it right on the head when you mentioned the money aspect. Obviously, this technology is very advanced. Whatever they have gleaned from recovery of craft and bodies could be very valuable in, let's say, military weaponry of sorts. So, and that has been converted, working with industry, right? Aerospace industries, such as Lockheed, for example.
Yeah.
So there's a greed element of money-making opportunity, greed. Then there's the element of the fact that these secrets can be used as bargaining chips between countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I know something that you'd like to know about what we've discovered about certain materials, we could maybe have a bargain while you tell me this other secret that you have that I'd like to know. So it could be used as bargaining chips. Yes, there's probably a real concern about how this knowledge, or what is known about these things, would disrupt economies, for example, and religious beliefs. What impact would it have socially? I think those are kind of cop-outs, because I think the public can deal with those things if we had the facts.
Yeah.
And of course, democracies are based on public knowledge of what their governments are doing. If we allow them to just keep these secrets to themselves, I don't agree with Tom DeLonge that they're doing us any kind of a favor. If we allow them to keep these secrets, we're allowing corruption in government. Basically, in a democratic form of government, we're allowing corruption to thrive. And the best way democracy works is if the public knows what's going on.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I guess the other question, not that you can answer this, but it's just like a kind of a hypothetical question, is even the people that do know, the most of all of us, all of this group of, this elite group of humans that know the most about this topic more than anybody else, even them, I wonder how much they know. I wonder how much the most well-educated person on this topic actually knows for a fact. Like, do we know, exactly what these beings, if there are beings in the craft, what they are, where they're from, and again, like, what intentions is a huge one as well, isn't it? Like, why are they coming here? And it comes back to nukes. I didn't really ask you that, but why are they so focused on nuclear weapons as well, and things like that?
Well, I can give you my answer, or what I think is going on with the nuclear issue, and that is they're trying to help us come to the full realization, as we started our show, that we must abolish nuclear weapons. I don't see any future for humanity, basically, if we maintain the status quo with regard to nukes. Problem is just going to get worse.
Mm.
And the risk will get higher that we have nuclear war, and nuclear war will be devastating to all of humanity. So I think they're trying to help us come to that realization by these incidents, by these demonstrations that they've given us. And your other question was, I'm sorry, I got lost track.
I think I was just hypothetically kind of asking, why are they here and all that kind of thing.
Why? Yeah, well, they're here. I think there's no
Yeah.
there's no question in my mind, at least, that they are here. That these are extraterrestrial entities that are here. And you're right. I don't think even the cabal, this UFO cabal, has all the answers. I don't think they do. We, as humanity, if we're going to have dealings with these extraterrestrials properly, it should be all of human civilization dealing with them, because right now, we've got in the U.S. now we've got something called the Space Force, right? And so, how do they look at this? Obviously, they're the enemy. They've got all this great military capability. There must be the enemy. So we don't want our military deciding who our enemies are going to be.
Mm.
We need to decide that.
Yeah.
Public should decide that. And that's what I mean by corruption in government.
I think a good rule of thumb on that is that anybody that profits from something shouldn't really be the one deciding if we do that,
exactly, yeah.
And you even see it on the mainstream news and stuff sometimes, where a channel will have on somebody to talk about war, and it's literally somebody that profits from war, and it's like, okay, this is the best person we could find to talk about this. This is the most neutral voice. But yeah, you're very right that we don't want, because this could be such. If there are extraterrestrials here, there are some aliens from somewhere else. Again, there's so many questions there, but we're best to tread lightly. We're best to be careful here and proceed with caution. And yeah, it depends who's in charge, I guess, as to what approach we would take.
Right.
Like, what would you do if you were in this position? Say, if it was on some level your decision, like, should we be trying to communicate? Should we be worried? It's kind of the two extremes would be pointing a gun or holding out a hand, I guess. But like, how do we proceed here?
Right. Well, I've got a painting in my study here. And the painting was done by C.M. Russell, who is painted Native Americans in the West. At any rate, it shows the Lewis and Clark expedition meeting the Flathead Indians in Montana, excuse me, around 1804. And the reason I love this painting is because we find ourselves in the same kind of situation if we're going to be meeting up with ET, right? Mm. Here we've got a situation where we know they're an advanced race technologically. We don't know much about what their ethics are, or their morality, or their religion, or whether they want to enslave us, or whether they want to be friends, etc. So you're right, we have to tread lightly and cautiously, but my point is it has to be a decision made by humanity as a whole and not by a few elites. I can't give you any answers as to who they are, what they're after. I know that the abduction phenomenon is real. I'm I know that for sure. I know that they are most likely producing hybrids. In other words, part human, part them. For what purpose? I don't know. Uh, but this is being done.
Where do you hear about the
They,
hybrid stuff? I have heard that other places. Where did you hear that though?
well, again, there's a lot of testimony from people who have experienced abductions where they have seen hybrid children on board craft.
Mm.
They've been introduced to them as their offspring. uh, there is a lot of testimony to that effect. So there's no question in my mind that they are abducting, probably have abducted in the millions of people. I don't know how many hybrid children they produced or for what purpose. But it is going on. They have also done cattle mutilations.
I was going to ask you about that actually. Yeah.
That is absolutely certain. There have been so many reports all over the world, by the way, not just in the U.S., of them mutilating cattle. For what purpose? I don't know. I mean, we can all speculate, but so, like I said, someone in government in this cabal is evaluating or has evaluated these sorts of things, the abductions, the mutilations. You can throw in Bigfoot, other things. And they know a lot more than we know because of the resources and the validation and the validity of the incidents. So they know more about that than we do.
Yeah.
We, the public. But we have a right to know what they know.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with this, obviously. This is affecting real people.
Yeah. And I mean, we're all adults, right? Everybody that is an
Well,
adult is an adult. And they, nobody has, in my opinion at least, nobody has a right to decide as a standalone person, a non-elected official even. Nobody has the right to just say, oh, yeah, we're not going to tell them that.
Right. Nobody has that right. They
even
shouldn't.
If it's scary and even if it might change how I live my life and even if it might change how I think, you can't just not tell me because it suits your interests, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's scary. In terms of the UFOs and the nukes again, and you saying that you think it's that they're trying to dissuade us from using nuclear weapons. Do you think that? Firstly, do you think that applies to all types of nuclear? Do you think that applies to power? Like my friend, I told him I was going to be talking to you, and he was interested to ask you that basically whether it's just focused on nuclear weapons or if it's also that they have any interest in nuclear power stations. Funnily enough, the same day he asked me that, I did see mentioned somewhere, I didn't manage to read all about it, but I did see something linking the two, a power station and UFOs. But do you know much about that?
Yeah, there have been many, many reports of UFOs seen over nuclear power plants. In fact, there was an article in Pravda, the Russian newspaper, stating that UFOs were seen over the Chernobyl power plant before and after the incident at Chernobyl. This was a write-up in Pravda. But anyway, I think, again, as you probably know, nuclear power plants produce nuclear waste. And that nuclear waste can be weaponized. If it's taken, it can be enriched and weaponized. So there again, we have that risk. Not only that, but we have the radiation, results of radiation from explosions such as what happened in Chernobyl and Fukushima, right? Very dangerous We don't know how dangerous it is, but obviously no good can come from radioactive waste getting into the oceans and going all over. And the same thing happened over the UK. As a matter of fact, this radioactive cloud flew over the United Kingdom and Western Europe, didn't it? And probably affected the rate of cancer in those areas. So yes, also very dangerous.
Wow. Yeah. Because I remember I mentioned to you I had Ralph Blumenthal on this podcast, and we talked about obviously John Mack, Dr. John Mack, because he wrote his biography. And I know that John Mack confirmed that a lot of the experiences that he spoke to, the people that claimed they'd been abducted, said that the extraterrestrials, the beings, whatever, were trying to pass them information to say that, yeah, we're killing our planet and we need to stop, nuclear, power or weapons, whatever. We need to change our ways. And that was something he reported a lot at Ariel School as well. I'm sure you're familiar with Ariel School in Zimbabwe. Yeah. And again, he went out and spoke to the kids. And again, I believe that was the messaging that they were trying to pass to these kids, was that, we need to stop what we're doing with just destroying the planet on the whole. But I think there was always that kind of edge to it with the nuclear stuff as well. And John Mack actually was like, he would protest against these things. He would go and like walk and do stuff at nuclear sites and things like that. So yeah, it does seem to be inextricably connected, doesn't it? Even the more modern things with the Nimitz, like they have nuclear capabilities, right?
Right. Well, yeah, nuclear powered aircraft carrier, sure.
Yeah,
certainly.
It's yeah.
So again, these things are connected. If, for example, there were open hearings in Congress, the U.S. Congress, and some of us witnesses came forward, started speaking about these things openly, that would go a long way to getting people to start asking more questions. By people, I mean, government officials to start asking more questions of agencies like the U.S. Air Force as to what they've been hiding over the years and why. We need to have a huge public discussion about this whole subject, because everything is connected here. The nuclear energy, nuclear power, nuclear weapons issue also relates to energy production, which relates to global warming, etc. All these problems are interconnected, but they basically, the question we want to have answered, especially if we have children, grandchildren, will we have a planet for them to live on? What will be their future? And we want to answer that question. So
yeah. Right now it doesn't seem like a great answer that we have, does it?
No.
It's worrying. It's scary to think what the state of the planet could be, and even as little as 20, 30 years, 40, 50, and yeah. I think it's going to be a very telling time for humanity the next couple of hundred. If we can survive that, then we might be the next guys flying around in unidentified flying objects in a different star system.
Right.
But I think the next couple of hundred are going to be very challenging.
Right. And so, yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, so we're also trying to explore space, right?
Yeah.
We want to set up facilities on the moon. We want to explore the Mars. We want to send people to other planets, other star systems. Are we ready to do that? I mean, are we going to take our earthly problems with us, let's say to the moon? What if China has their own base on the moon? Russia has theirs. We have ours. Are we going to point weapons at each other there?
Yeah.
So again, this is all connected. And that's why it's important that we have this discussion openly. Now, I was also going to mention there is an effort going on right now uh, to set up an office or proposed to set up an office in the United Nations uh, on the UFO subject or UAP subject, and hopefully that'll be take fruition sometime later this year. But that effort is also taking place.
Yeah. Why do you think that people like the just your average person and your average kind of media, your average media company, broadcast, news or magazines or whatever, why did there just not seem to be that much interest in this subject? Have you got any ideas on that? Do you think it's still a hangover from when it was, all ridiculed and they intentionally ridiculed from the inside? Do you think it's a hangover from that? Or is it just that maybe people don't want to entertain things that's going to, that's uncomfortable realities?
Yeah, I think the media right now is AWOL or in hiatus about this subject for a couple of reasons. One is the people that have the answers are government, intel agencies, things like that. And the media needs access. In order to produce stories about government, they need access to people in government. And they don't want to upset that relationship by talking about this subject right now. However, I think this will change because of what has been instituted now in this amendment to the RR in the U.S., the National Defense Act, which has a section in it where the intelligence community and the military, the Department of Defense, has to now address the UAP question in some detail. Talk to our Congress in secret meetings, but also have public reports. The first one is going to happen in March of this year, next month. That will probably be a classified briefing as to where we stand with those 144 cases you mentioned that the Navy has admitted to. But what about the other history of UFOs? And again, that should come up in October, will be another report, October of this year. Another report is due, and part of that is supposed to be public. And then people like myself and others are going to be pushing for public hearings. I don't expect public hearings this year because we have an election year in the United States, and politicians don't want to talk about UFOs in an election year.
Nothing controversial.
Too controversial. So I don't expect public hearings until next year sometime, if it happens. But we're going to be pressing for that. I don't see how the Air Force, for example, can avoid speaking to the many, many incidents that have occurred in Air Force facilities.
Yeah.
Especially if the press starts to push them for answers. So I would encourage any media professionals out there to keep pressing our military institutions for answers on those incidents like Roswell, like my own, that have happened over the years. Yeah. And just keep pressing, keep pushing for answers.
And I guess one thing, like on a slightly more positive note, I suppose, I mean, it's been 5 years approximately since the article that came out in the New York Times that kind of seemed to change a little bit the attitude, towards this. And I do think I have noticed personally, even news channels that would normally never touch this with a barge pole, like they would never mention it, even in passing, even with, a smirk. I have noticed more recently some of those channels and those news sites have started to, not much, but they've started to kind of delve into
Right.
it a little bit more, and gradually, and you see you do see it. I'm noticing it. I'm noticing the narrative change. I'm noticing more people start to be more open to it and start to look at it differently.
Right.
And I guess that's all probably part of, or potentially part of, a disclosure, right? Things starting to come to the surface, rise to the surface, starting to come out.
That's right. There's the UFO community, we'll call it a community of people that have been interested in this subject for a long time.
Yeah.
They know a lot of real information, information that can be validated. And they will help promote these probing questions. It's just a matter of more people asking those questions and keep pressing for answers. So if we can keep this momentum going, it will go a long way to eventually getting more media to take this subject more seriously. Like you said, I'm also seeing more media taking this more seriously in the United States. I'm thinking of, the guy on Fox News, Tucker Carlson, has spoken about it. I myself went on a news station immediately after I gave that press conference last October. So I'm going to take every opportunity I can to keep discussing this.
Great. Do you think, let me ask you just directly, do you think the US has craft? Do you think the US government is in possession of craft?
I think there have been experimental craft built, yes. I won't go into why, but I have my reasons.
Do you believe they've recovered any, or do you believe they've just built their
absolutely,
own?
no question.
So
they've recovered
so
craft.
you think they've successfully re-engineered potentially?
Well, I can't say they've successfully re-engineered a craft, but I know they have built and flown craft that are able to do some of the things these objects can do.
Yeah,
I'm convinced of that.
And what relevance or connection do you think some of the private industries and private aerospace companies, such as you mentioned earlier, Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, like, how influential do you think they could be? Could we be in a situation where actually they hold some of the keys here and they have some of the information, and they don't want to give it up through government because they want to be compensated financially for that?
Exactly. They've got a very close relationship with our military establishment. Obviously, they produce the weapons of war, the aircraft of war. So I don't think they're going to make any disclosures unless they get the green light from the DOD or our military. I think they're very tight, and
But yeah, they've obviously got a lot of space as well to house stuff over there and things like that. So yeah. Let me ask you about a couple of other things. So you said you know about aerial school, and I'm assuming you know about Westall. Like, what do you think of these mass sightings, and why don't they seem to get more kind of traction? Why are they not more known?
Well, again, it's a shame to put it this way, but I think most people believe what children say when. Especially when there's repetition, repeatability. There's telling the same story, even though they're interviewed separately. So I have no doubt that those incidents did occur in Australia and Africa.
Yeah.
In fact, when I spoke in Peru, I think it was called Ayacucho, Peru, we were welcomed there by the mayor of the city, who told us that when he was a child in a school, they had a mass sighting by the children there. And this was back in probably the 70s. So why would the UFOs or ETs land at schools? Well, again, these kids are our future. And of course, they would want to at least greet them and tell them that they're here, they are real, and they, as children, are going to grow up and have to deal with them, have to deal with that knowledge, and to give them the message, like you said, of the nuclear weapons. So, yeah, I think I believe them, absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, you think abductions, cattle mutilations, you think that's legit and you think it's connected. What about crop circles?
Yes, also crop circles. Yeah. Of course, we've all heard that there are people out there that were able to do crop circles on their own, but there are many others where crop circles were made inexplicably, very quickly. I'll tell you a quick story, and this happened, maybe 10, 15 years ago. I was marching in a parade here in my little hometown of Ojai, and this was a 4th of July parade. Let's see, 4th of July parade. And part of the parade was this group of Aztec dancers. They had the feathers and all dressed up as Aztec dancers, and I was walking with them. I knew some of them. I had met the group, and one of them had this headdress, this Aztec headdress, right, with feathers.
Mm-hmm.
I took a photo of him. The next day, and this was July the 5th in the UK, there was a crop circle. And I don't know if you remember seeing it, but you can look it up, or I can send you a picture of it. Actually, I'll send you a photograph. All right.
Great. I'll put it up.
And you can put it up. But it showed an Aztec headdress, very, very similar to the photograph that I had taken the day before. Now, okay, so that, and I think there was one other incident involving crop circles that I was involved in that convinced me there's something going on where these crop circles are sending messages of some sort to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're fascinating. I think they're obviously really easy to kind of close your mind to and dismiss, right? It's easy for somebody to just say, "Oh, come on," somebody's just gone and done that. But when you do look into it a little bit deeper, they are quite interesting. I mean, I think, because again, it's like, why we kind of anthropomorphize it. Like, why would they be doing this? What are they trying to say to us? Why are they passing messages through the crops? And it could be anything. It could be, passing messages to themselves. It could be like marker, waypoints or something.
Well, when you think about symbology and communication, let's take communication again. The only reason these natives were able to talk to Lewis and Clark in 1804 is because they had an interpreter with them. Lewis and Clark did, and so they had somebody interpreting their language. But we don't have interpreters per se to talk to ET. We don't understand how they communicate. But maybe they think that in the beauty of these circles, and they are beautiful, some of them are gorgeous, very intricate designs, mathematically oriented. Maybe they feel that this is another way of expressing some form of communication to us or with us. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Have you ever seen the film Arrival?
Yes,
That's a really
fantastic.
interesting
I loved
film.
it. I loved the
Yeah,
film. Um,
yeah,
um, Again, it was steeped in symbology,
mm,
um, and uh, again, it's an attempt at communication.
yeah,
So, in various ways, I think ET is trying to communicate with us. Um, and maybe we are getting the gist of what they're trying to communicate, and we just don't realize it.
mm,
Maybe humanity is evolving in some way through this communication. Maybe it's subtle, but maybe we are, let's hope, improving the species in some way as a
yeah,
result of this communication.
yeah. Definitely hope for that. It can't get much worse. Hopefully. um, on the subject of that movie, what's your favorite UFO movie, if you've got one, or UFO ET related to this kind of topic? Just for fun,
I
first of
think
all.
Close Encounters has to be my favorite because a lot of, well, not a lot, but at least some of what was presented actually happened
Yeah.
in one way or another. I know of like the incident where he's parked in front of the railroad tracks, Richard Dreyfuss, the actor, and his truck starts shaking like this, right? Uh, and all the lights go out in the truck, all the electronics go out, electricity. That really happened because I've, researched that particular incident. It happened to one of the Air Force people that I've talked to.
And
So,
Spielberg got that from this
and
person.
Spielberg got that from somewhere,
Yeah, because I know
from that
because I
incident.
know a lot of it. Yeah, he did speak to a lot of people who had had experiences and things like that, and so yeah,
Yeah.
I guess that's why the film ended up being so good. What would you say? You kind of answered it, so maybe it's the same film. Which, if it is, that's fine. But what about the most realistic UFO or ET movie? You can say the same one if you want, but
Yeah, I think that's the most realistic. The others, like ET, the extraterrestrial, I think is pretty fantastical. Even though, and Paul was the funniest, of course. Did you
yeah,
see Paul?
yeah, I see that one. Yeah,
But I think these extraterrestrials have been captured alive, and so, but I don't know how long they've lived. Um, but I think that has happened.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I would go back to Close Encounters. I think is my favorite and also the most realistic.
Just to go back to what you just said there about them being captured alive again. I know you don't know this information, but what do you think they are from your best estimations, or just even from your gut feeling? Do you think it's like an interplanetary, an interstellar civilization, or do you think it's because you hear different things, right? Some people have these hypotheses where they could be future human, or they could be a non-human intelligence, but an intelligence that's been on this planet, with us for a long period of time, maybe doing their own thing in secret. There's lots of different hypotheses, like I say, interdimensional things. It could be stuff that's not even physical. I did Christopher Mellon, again, I'll mention him the other day. He did say in an interview, I heard him, he said that from his point of view, from his opinion, the hypothesis that best fits the facts is the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But yeah, what's your gut feeling on that? Do you think it's as simple as that? Because to me, that almost seems like one of the more simple, just like just come in from another planet.
Well, I think you risk. It's a little bit risky to start throwing out little things like that. I've heard, the what is Occam's razor? Have you heard that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. the simplest explanation is probably the truth, but I don't think you can just go with that. Um, uh, let's see, what was your question again? Let's go over that.
Just like basically what your gut feeling is in terms of who or what they are, like whether they're an interplanetary kind of biological entities like us, or is it something a bit more
well, first of all,
different?
I think there are multiple species that are visiting. They are probably working together, but I'm not sure about that. I don't know. But obviously, there have been reports by witnesses with different descriptions of what these beings look like. Of course, the most common is the gray, but I wanted to mention the incident in Varginha, Brazil, which you may have heard of.
I know that James Fox, I think, is doing a documentary on that now. It's going to come out at some point. I don't know when. Yeah.
But the description of that being does not fit the typical gray description.
Can you tell me what that was? The description of that one?
Description fits more like, I know if you saw, let's see, The Shape of Water. Did you see that movie, The Shape of Water?
No, I should
go see that movie, or you can get it on Netflix, I'm sure.
On the list, I'll add it to my list.
But there is a being in there, non-human, with hard to describe, but he's got a big ridge on the top of his head. He's got fins. He's got webbed hands, etc. But anyway, that description of that being in that movie fits closely to what witnesses describe as the Varginha monster, the ET that escaped a crashed craft near Varginha, Brazil, which is near Sao Paulo. I think it's not too far from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And kind of terrorized the little town for a while until he was caught. So he's one of those that was captured alive. I think he died shortly after, but who knows what they were able to get out of him.
Yeah.
So I want to mention that. The other thing I wanted to mention, if you go to a website called the Alien Project, you'll see these so-called mummies that were recovered near Nazca, the Nazca Plain, in a cave with 3 fingers. These are all tridactyl. Some of them are very small, 20 inches. Another, however, is 5'7", but also with 3 fingers, 3 toes. I went down to Peru and reviewed the reports and listened to the presentations of the scientists that have worked on these. And let me tell you, there's some convincing evidence these were real beings. They are not human, but they walked upright. They had implants, visible implants, etc. And one of them had, 2 of them at least, had 3 eggs in their abdomen. So they gave birth through the egg process, or as a reptile would give birth with eggs. So, and the skin was reptilian in nature. So there's wild, something else for you to look into.
Yeah. So what was that called? What do I have to look for to look into that one?
The Alien Project.
The Alien Project. Okay. Again,
just Google that. You should be able to find it. If not, I'll send you the link.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll check that one out. That's that's wild. I mean, this whole topic is wild, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, right. So again, there's a lot of species that are visiting. The question is, are they working independently? Are they working together? Do they each have their own agendas? Lots of questions.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously it's fun to speculate about, but that's all it is, right? Because it's so far beyond our way, any way we
Yeah.
have of knowing it right now. Like, and we only have ourselves to compare it to. Like, and I think
Right.
we're a long way from being team members and working together with another, an alien civilization, which is in essence what could be happening here. So yeah, it is a wild topic. I mean, yeah, it's you concept. I mean, even you, right? That you've accepted this reality, but I'm sure you still get your mind blown fairly regularly on this topic.
I'm keeping my mind open, let's say, to
Yeah,
what we might discover in the future.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me finish off with a question here, because I'm conscious I don't want to keep you too long, and we've already been here a good little while. So excluding your own case and the ones that were directly related, so like the Echo flight, if you could pick one, or for the sake of this, I'll let you, if you want to pick a couple, but if you could pick one case, to present to kind of skeptical, skeptics, people that are really like, I'm not sure, I'm not convinced, convince me. If you could pick one case
Okay.
that's not yours, what would it be?
It would be the one that happened in the Netherlands, 1979, 1979. This was at Schosterberg. Um, it's a city. It's also an air base that was used by the U.S. Air Force. And in 1979, there was this lady called Josie Zwinenberg. Josie Zwinenberg. She's public. She's in my book, but she was riding her horse near the base and saw this huge UFO, multicolored, hovering near the base, and saw it for quite a long time until it disappeared. But the next day, a UFO flew right down the flight line of this base, Schosterberg, the Netherlands. It was seen by 12 airmen, both from the Dutch Air Force and also the U.S. Air Force that was renting parts of that base. Those witnesses went on the radio the next day and told their story and described the craft, described it going slowly down the runway, shining a beam of light. And again, at that time, I'm certain there were aircraft stationed there that were capable of carrying nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons. And this is probably the closest base to the Soviet Union at that time.
Wow.
So that's a very strong case because of the fact of all the witnesses, credible witnesses, and I've known Josie for a long, long time. All the credible witnesses, including the military witnesses, they can support what I just said.
Wow. Yeah, that's something. And it's quite fun for me, because I've read into hundreds of cases in this subject matter, and I don't think I've ever come across that one. So that's fun. That's great. And that says everything about this topic as well, that there are just
Right.
such a wealth and such a ludicrous amount of data.
And the only reason I mention that is because I know a lot about it. But there are many, many other cases that are very interesting and very credible. And again, because they're supportable by documents and witnesses. And all anyone has to do with an open mind is research some of these cases, and they'll find that that's true. And they will come to the same conclusions that I have, and that is this is a real phenomenon. These are extraterrestrial craft because we couldn't possibly build anything that could do what some of these can do. And there it is. It's a simple calculus. Well, we're going to have to deal with it.
I mean, you say you like having lots of different witnesses at once, and I guess again the Nimitz is like a pretty good
that's
one,
another
right?
one, of
That's
course.
like so many people, but yet so many radars and systems at the same time.
Right.
So it really, and I'm assuming there's again more video that we haven't seen. I'm assuming there's more radars that have caught stuff, like the aforementioned U.S. Air Force radars. Their extensive capabilities that have apparently not really picked up anything. I'm assuming there's a lot more, but there's already a lot on that Nimitz encounters. Look, to round us out today, Robert, do you want to leave a kind of a brief message for anybody watching or listening? Just a few words. It doesn't have to be about anything in particular. It doesn't have to be about this topic. You can just wish people a nice day. Whatever you want to say, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ben, for having me on. It's been fun talking to you. I guess what I'd like to say is that we will be finding out more about this subject of UFOs, UAPs in the future. I'm encouraged by the progress that has been made to require our Defense Department, intelligence agencies to research this subject and report back to the public. It's going to take time, and it's going to take pressure by the public to get more information out of our governments, but they have that information. They need to release it to the public so that we can all engage in this subject intelligently. And I'm hopeful it will happen, especially if we can have open hearings on this subject, and especially if the United Nations takes up this topic as a serious one. So this is not Fantasyland. It's not a sci-fi movie. This is real. And we'll be learning more about it in the future.
Awesome. I can't wait to learn more. I'm sure you're the same. I can't wait to hear more stuff about this, because it is such a huge topic, one of the biggest that we'll ever face. Thank you so much for today, Robert. This was awesome. It was so good to hear your stories firsthand and talk about the whole thing. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Ben.
Appreciate you. Take care. Thank you. You too. Thanks for listening to that conversation with Robert Salas. I hope you enjoyed it. Please check out the links in the description to find out more about Robert and his story, and to be able to follow this podcast. There's plenty more UFO content coming up soon, so please subscribe to be notified of it. Be nice, be happy, be cool.